Here's Brody Brazil.
So there's a brand new law here in the state of California that not too many people were even aware of until the school year got underway. And it centers around high school sports and heat. They're trying to protect student athletes from extreme heat conditions during practice sessions and games. They're certainly trying to avoid the avoidable of heat-related illness and even potential death that we've seen across the state and across the country in the last 25 years or so. Let's get into these new procedures. This is mandated by California law. When Assembly Bill 1653 passed in October of 2023, it put the burden on the CIF, the California Interscholastic Federation, to develop guidelines, procedures, and safety standards for prevention and management of exertional heat illness. Essentially, it's on the CIF to figure out how to do this so you can hold practice sessions and games only when it's healthy to do so, and only with guidelines of how many breaks to take, how many water breaks to take, all of the above. But all of this was officially implemented by the CIF, a couple weeks or now months ago in July of 2024. So they met the deadline of when to set the guidelines. In terms of the effects of heat, and I know some people will say, hey, I'm from the old school. We didn't have heat breaks, or we didn't skip practice sessions and it was 110 and we were out there. But it's important you know this. California is not alone in this. In fact, they're far from it. Actually, if there's 50 states, they're kind of late to the party here. California joins 24 other states that require schools to monitor heat for sports participation. And according to PBS, at least 50 U.S. high school football players have died from heat stroke on the field in the last 25 years. Now, you can imagine how many others have had heat-related illnesses that were simply taken care of and resolved, but 50 deaths in the past 25 years, that's obviously 2 per year, and that is too many every single year. Also from PBS, this reporting which says female cross-country athletes are actually twice as likely to suffer heat-related illness than any other sport. So I know we're talking about football and practices and two-a-days and how things get started even before the school year does, and how they're practicing in mid to late August at one of the hottest points of the year. Even in September and October, it still stays hot in a lot of parts of California. But let's be clear, it is about high school football. It's also very much about something like cross-country and other sports as well. The reality of it all is this, a couple different things. Every heat-related death and even illness was preventable if you went about the right precautions and paced yourself and thought twice about things. It's hard to find another way around it that those deaths weren't preventable. They were. We've also seen 9 of the 10 hottest years on record globally since the year 2012. So obviously we need to be a lot more mindful about heat and the effects of heat on the body, and especially when the body is participating in sports. A young body is participating in sports and exerting itself. We've also had a really bad run of air quality in the western United States due to wildfires in the last 3, 5, 7+ years. So we'll talk about the air quality index in just a second as well. So what the CIF decided to do was separate California into 3 categories. And I wish the color coding was a little bit more clear here. It's not. But you can plainly see that there's a coastal category, there's a little bit of an inland category, and then there's a deep inland category, which kind of runs up through the foothills of the Sierra and into the Tahoe, Nevada, California state border, right where the elbow is, the angle is in the California border between it and Nevada. So bottom line is they've drawn 3 different categories here. That's also causing some backlash and concern, these different geographical breakups and breakdowns, which I'll get to in just a second. So now you know 3 categories. How do they do this? They measure the temperature not with a thermometer anymore. They use a Wet Bulb Globe Thermometer. This is different from the standard mercury that everybody's been using for decades and decades. This specific Wet Bulb Globe Thermometer measures how heat stresses the human body because it uses a multitude of measurings. Like this device right here, from the brand Kestrel. I think this is like the Kestrel 5400. This is one of the popular devices that schools are all getting now. Cost, I think, a couple $100. It calculates the impact of a couple different things together and gives you an ultimate actual temperature. It calculates the impact of temperature, as well as humidity, as well as wind, as well as sun strength, like cloud cover, as well as the angle of the sun. It gives you a much better impact of how much heat is actually affecting the body, not just what the temperature is. Because you understand, sometimes the temperature can be lower, but humidity is higher. It feels way more hot and sticky. And sometimes the wind can actually lower the temperature or the effects of temperature on the body. If it's a little bit windy, kind of makes you feel better instead of that still, stagnant air. Imagine still air, humid air, and high temperatures. That is way different than hot and dry. And windy all at the same time. You know when they say, oh, it's a dry heat? There really is something to that on the body. But this Wet Bulb Globe Thermometer is way more accurate, gives a much more accurate indication than just temperature alone. So we're finally kind of evolving in a sense of understanding what hot is versus what the effects of heat on the body actually are. We're getting a little bit more detailed in our technology. But here are the rules. Those three categories, right, those three regions have different values and ranges of temperatures for the activity guidelines. Like there's a green section, then a yellow section, then an orange section, then a red section, and a black section. For example, the normal activities section says provide at least 3 separate rest breaks each hour with a minimum duration of 3 minutes each during the workout. That's pretty typical of what a practice session is like. The yellow section, a little bit more caution. Use discretion for intense or prolonged exercise. Provide at least 3 separate rest breaks each hour with a minimum duration of 4 minutes each, right? So that's pretty easy to attain. Then you get into the orange kind of caution section. Maximum outdoor practice time is 2 hours. Provide at least 4 separate rest breaks each hour with a minimum duration of 4 minutes each. And then there's some separate ramifications for football and field hockey practice, including pads and jerseys and uniforms. Then you get into the red section. Like this is where it's getting a little bit hotter on that Wet Bulb Globe Thermometer. Contests are permitted with additional hydration breaks. Maximum outdoor practice time is 1 hour. No protective equipment may be worn during practice, and there may be no conditioning activities. There must be 20 minutes of rest breaks distributed throughout the hour of the practice. So essentially 1/3 of your hour has to be spent resting when it's in that temperature range. And then the last one is with those different values there of 86, 89, and 92, depending on what category you're in. No outdoor workouts or contests. Delay practice and competitions until a cooler Wet Bulb Globe Thermometer temperature is reached. Now again, when you see these, you're going to look at them and say, oh, those temperatures are very low. Remember, this is not your traditional temperature taken with mercury in a thermometer like that. This is from the Wet Bulb Globe Thermometer. All of the readings are different. They translate different. But it's just to know and understand that this is a better gauge. These are different temperatures than what you're probably accustomed to. There's also the situation surrounding air quality, and they're starting to address this with the CIF. If the AQI, like on your phone, you see it now, it's in a bunch of different places. purpleair.com does a great job with that map and readings. If the AQI is between 100 and 150, you must consider possible adjustments to your practice plans. And if the AQI is 151 or greater, you must cancel all activity. And let's be honest, in recent years, I think we've seen a lot of days where the AQI peaks well above 151, and a lot of things still continue. Professional sports, college sports, high school sports had been going on, but now they're going to try and put a clamp down on the AQI. They've set their threshold. Okay, all of this is not exactly going off without a hitch, because California, as you know, if you live here, has so many microclimates. And those 3 zones, they really are a rough draft. They need some refinement. For example, I'll give you one that is very clear to me. Santa Clara, right? Santa Clara County of the South Bay of the Bay Area here in Northern California. It's over the hill north of Santa Cruz, but Santa Cruz is on the coast. Santa Clara is very much more inland. The temperatures get hot in Santa Clara. Like, they could be affected by some of those warnings and some of those cautions and precautions that they need to take. Santa Cruz is in the same zone, and they'll never have that problem. It's cooled by the ocean. They're right on the water. Like, they may not be affected by any of this ever. Like, at all, ever. But yet they're in the same zone. It would kind of make more sense to put Santa Clara in the zone with hotter tolerances rather than the one with the most mild tolerances. I get it, it's within 20 miles of the coast, but the climate is nowhere near what it's like actually on the coast. So my point is, they probably need to redraw the category and zone map. The second issue so far is that practices for coaches, right? They'll say, well, we need to practice still. And if we're not going to do it at 3:30 in the afternoon, we're going to do it tonight at 7:30. So now practices aren't canceled, they're just delayed, and later practice time can interfere with, things like dinner and family and social time and academic time and other things that young students and young student athletes need. Practice is going late, less sleep schedules all off. All of a sudden, football practice is kind of a burden instead of something that's fun to do. Or the other part is practice gets canceled. And what if practice gets canceled for 3 days straight before you go into a game that ultimately, let's say you can play on a Friday night because the temperature is not a problem late at night, and now your team hasn't practiced in a couple days, they're not up to speed on, forget the strategy, but on safe and efficient play of a football game. They're not conditioned for this. Now you're putting them in a dangerous spot to get hurt because they weren't able to have the normal practices that everybody else is supposed to have. So I think overall, I like the fact that the state of California and the CIF, they're looking out for high school athletes. And I agree, any deaths that happen because of heat are preventable and from here on out should be prevented as best as possible. On the flip side, if there really is this friction and this concern about, I think we're good and there's no real reason why and we got to redraw the lines here, there should be some adjustments. I hope the CIF is just willing to see and hear and listen and take feedback and make adjustments so that this is still a good program. It still is workable. It just might take some time to actually perfect so that nobody's complaining, but everybody is safer today than they were last year and safer than they ever have been before. So you love to see progress. You love to see modernization. You love to see us getting smarter with sport and with society. You've made it here to the end of this video. I really appreciate that. Thumbs up down below. That'll greatly help me and this video and this channel. I would like that, but I would love it even more if I get to see you back here next time. The way we make that happen is you go down there right now. Make sure you've got that subscribe button on.